Hi everyone, my name's Jackie and welcome to Vintage Witchcrafts. Today we're going to be looking at another quilting project that I have been working on for some time, Millefiori quilts, the Passacaglia design. Here's the book that we're using with the pattern in it, and here also is a cat, and she's gone. Here's the book. Let's take a deeper dive and a closer look at Millefiori quilts. This is the book that the quilt pattern comes from. It's called Millefiori Quilts by William Hammerstein. What is Millefiori quilt? I had a Google to see what they said about that, and it said, and I quote, a Millefiori quilt is a quilt that is made up of thousands of pieced shapes, usually hand sewn and inspired by Venetian Millefiori glass. The word Millefiori is Italian for thousands of flowers. And you can see from this cover the many pieces all joined together. You might say, yes, they kind of look like flowers. They're often referred to as kaleidoscopic in nature as well. So if we open the book here, here's a picture of William, and it was really her that brought this wonderful form of quilting to the forefront. This is the first book. She's a Dutch quilter, and all of these designs in this book are what we call English paper piecing, and we'll get into that a bit more in a moment. So lots of patterns in this book. I was drawn to this one. This is called Passacaglia with Mr. Penrose. It has since been shortened in the quilting world to La Passa or La Passacaglia quilts. If people say, oh, I'm working on a La Passa or a La Passacaglia quilt, most quilters kind of know what we mean by that. And why was I drawn out of all those to this particular quilt? Mainly because I saw it at a quilt show. So if I go through the book, try and find the page that I want here, many lovely quilts you can see. They all look quite complex, and some of them actually are quite complex. But I saw the La Passacaglia hanging up at the quilt show in Birmingham. Ah, here we are. And I saw a representation of it. It looked not unlike this. And the first thing that struck me, apart from wow, was the fact that all around here there were loads of little pentagram shapes, and I love pentagrams and pentagram shapes, and it really caught my eye. That was before I knew anything about La Passacaglia and about Millefiori quilts. And I said to the people on the stand, and they were a company called Lina Patchworks, or Lina, I will put a link to them. What is this? And how on earth do you make it? So we'll look at that now, because although it looks very complicated, and you could say it is quite complicated, it's made up of loads of tiny little pieces, lots of different shapes. Again, the shapes that they're actually made up, the shapes that are used to create all of these sorts of designs are described as hexagons, diamonds, squares and trapezoid shapes. Let's have a further look then. So we turn the page here. This book is written in 2 languages, which are rather big. We can start to see that these shapes, these big shapes, are made up of lots of individual little ones. And lots of units. There's lots of different shaped units that you put together out of all these shapes until you've actually got something much bigger. And I'm going to show you a better illustration of that. This book, if you're interested, if you are a quilter and interested, they're very hard to get hold of now. The publisher, Quiltmania, went under, and Willin has done 5 of these books now. I have 3 of them. This is book 1. The newer ones did actually have book 1 on them, because when she first did these books, she didn't know she was going to end up doing 5 of them. But they are becoming increasingly rare to get hold of now. Willin herself is still making designs and publishing them more on the website now, until they can find a way of either getting another publisher or not, whether she'll just sell the patterns or certain patterns direct. So that's something that they're all looking into. So let us bring some of these into play. So let's call them Lina Patchworks. So first of all, I asked them, what do you need to start such a project? And they gave me all these packets of different shapes. So we've got a classic pentagon, we have a big one and a little one, a 36-degree diamond shape, a 36-degree isosceles triangle, and a 72-degree diamond shape. And whenever you run out of these things, you just order some more and carry on making up your shapes. So what you end up with is this, basically. So first of all, you need a template like that. The template will go on the fabric. So let me find you a piece of fabric to give you an idea. So here's a piece of fabric. So you would put your shape on the fabric, you would draw around, and then you would cut your shape out. And this is the paper template that goes in there. Now, this gives you a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance all the way around there. And so you would cut your fabric out to this size, and then you would fold it over onto this template here. And you can either sew the fabric with a tacking stitch to the template, or you can use something like this, which is a glue, which is the sort of thing that comes out in the wash, and I use these quite a bit. The reason that the templates are transparent like that is because you can end up doing something called fussy cutting. So if you happen to have, let me see if I can find another example of some fabric. Let's bring my box over of fabrics. Let's find something that's got a fussy kind of a picture on it. Oh, here we are. There we go. So let's get that out of the way and that out of the way. So as you can see, this is quite a busy pattern. And let's show you with the smaller hexagon, because I've used this quite a bit. So you see the template is much smaller on there. But if I was cutting this out, I wouldn't want to just cut this out randomly any old where. I think the centre of these spirals looks like the right place to be. So where there is a little star shape in the middle, I'd plonk that right in the middle of that pattern. And then I would draw around that, cut that out. And when we stick the bit of fabric to this, that would be right in the middle. And I might have some examples of that to show you later. So you've got your pieces and you're like, so how do I know? How do I know? Let's bring back the book again. I'm going to find here for you. How do you know how to make these things up? So you want your very first base unit. And the very first base unit, let's see here, is made up like this, and it is 5 diamond shapes with 5 different diamond shapes around it, and then 10 hexagons around there, and they are the center of all of the shapes. Now I'll show you that because I've got all the templates here. So let's have a look. I'm going to move the book over here. So we start off, we'd cut out 5 of these, and then they would be arranged like this. So imagine these are all covered with bits of fabric. So this is how the center of all of these blocks is done. So you've got those in there like that. And that's made out of that shape. And then we need this shape. This is a 36-degree diamond. So you would cut out a different fabric and then they would go in there like this. So I'm going to pop these, whoops, around here. It just gives you a rough idea. I don't want to be too fussy here. So you would then sew that to that, that to that, and so on around there. And then you've got your center piece. And then at each side of these, you would put your hexagon like this. So moving all around there with these. Oh, that one I've used before. Put that in there. So you can see now, can't you, as we start to build this up. And that's the bit you've got to start first before you really do anything else. Now, they're the basic building block, and some of these might be make one of these with some extra star shapes around them, and some might be only like that. And the star bits would come from other blocks that would then interlock with that. So if you want to see how to make the little pentagrams, then you're down to the small pieces. So you would have your small pentagram, and you would also have the tiniest, fiddliest of the pieces, these tiny little triangles. Tiny, tiny. See? And then, how do these work? Let me see. That one goes there. That one goes there. And then that would go in there like that. That goes there like that. That goes there like that. And then you'd have another one on top of there. Have I got another one? Well, I think you get an idea of how that is, don't you? So if you want to see how that translates into fabric, here's a diamond shape, for example. So here's a diamond that I've made there like that. And when you look at all the little pieces here, this is how they would fit, like that. So they would all go on there like that. And there'd be another one there and another one there. And in between each of those would be another diamond. What would that look like? What that would look like, first of all, let me show you. Here's one I prepared earlier. This is your basic middle part, the sort of starter block, if you will, for all of it. So here is another example in a different colour. So you end up, when you start off doing a bunch of these, here's another, and you just end up playing around with it, just doing these, getting a bunch together so that eventually you'll put the little stars on and sew them together. Here's quite a bright one. So I started off by doing, say, 10 of these centres, so you can see all different contrasting colours. Now, before we talk about the colour palette, let's look at one that's got stars on. So here is an example of a very dark gothic looking one. So you can see, if I lay that over there, you can see this centre panel, and then you can see how these star shapes and these diamonds lock in all around there. So when you're sewing them together, you would be looking for a part, something that you think might contrast well and go. So you might think, I might sew those together, or, you know, I might sew those together. I might do something like that. But then, you wouldn't do anything with that bit, because in the book, they have laid out for you how many of each shape to make and then how to start piecing them together. So if we come back over to the book again, let's find, right, so we've got the blocks. I think they're named, I don't know how many different blocks there are, I can't remember, but say this is block 1, block 2, block 3, block 4 and so on. Each one tells you how many you need to make. So this rosette here, which is funny looking shape one, you have to make 4 of block 7, for example, and 6 of block 8, or 3 of block 12, or something like that. But it gives you the bare bones of the drawing of what each block should look like. When you have all those blocks, then you need to start joining them together to make even bigger pieces of fabric. This is a very good diagram, color coded, so you know that these grey ones are rosette 2, this big white one is rosette 3, anything that's this peachy beige colour is rosette 6. So you know you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and you can check that back against there that I need 8 of that particular rosette. And you can see how they all join together to make up that quilt. And what they suggest when you are joining it up is that you join this section and this section together, which is that and that. And then you join all of these bits together, which is all of this bit down there. Not everybody does it that way. The problem that you will run into, maybe, is that if you have quite a restricted colour palette, you could end up making loads of these centre bits here. You could end up making loads of them, and how would you put them all together in a pleasing manner so you didn't have too much of one colour clashing together? You wanted some contrast. And it's trickier, I think, if you're limiting your colour palette, which I am, mainly because I'm trying to use some fabrics that I had. I had these blacks, I had some burgundies, I had some weird greys, to find some other ones. Oh, there we go, let's get up. I had this one, you know, from some fabric that I'd found in my stash. And my challenge was to try and make it all work somehow without having to buy in too much more fabric. And so what I've ended up doing is I've made a certain amount of rosettes, and then I've pieced together these rosettes, and then I've got so far with what I'm doing, and then I'm going to stop, pin it up on the quilt board, and then review where I need to plug in the colours that I want to sort of bring the quilt design together. To help me do that, I very cleverly took a picture of the whole quilt design, and then I took pictures of the individual rosettes that I'd made, and then I superimposed them on top. Do you see? And so that's kind of given me an idea of where I'm going. Where there's a light, I might want dark next to it. I might want two darks together. But the whole thing has to try and balance out, in my mind anyway, as to how I want it. And so that does sometimes mean moving things around. You see, I don't think I've kept this very pale one here in where I'm going with it now. But this block and this block and this block are all pieced together, as are these. And I think I can probably show you if I get some pieces. Let me just grab some bits. This is what I've been working on. And I'm going to show you more about how I got to this stage and how I pieced some of these bits together in another video. But you can see how this is coming along now. And you might just think, well, you know, you can just shove another one of those in there and one of those in there according to the pattern. But for me, I'm thinking, well, that's too close to that, and the quilt's quite big, so I might want this to be in a rosette that's down the other half of the quilt, so that my eye is drawn to this bit here and I can see a similar pattern further down the quilt. Otherwise it might end up looking like, you know, a quilt of two halves or something. So that is the La Passacaglia Millefiori quilt. I hope you've enjoyed that explanation. I'd say I would put a link to the books, but they're very hard to get hold of now. I would suggest you, if you're that interested and you really want to have a go, then Google them. I'll show you some of the other books and some of the other patterns at some stage, but I think we've got enough to be going on with this one. So that's the end of this video. Don't forget to like the video. Please comment if you're making one yourself, if you've never come across them before, if they're inspiring you to have a go. Do pop a comment down below. And the most important thing, the most important thing really is please subscribe to my humble channel, because not only is it just for my friends and family, but I'd like other YouTubers and people out there who are interested in this to have a look. So that's all for today. I'll see you soon. Goodbye.